Good evening. This is the August 13th, 2019 meeting of the East Long Meadow Town Council. I will open the meeting now with our typical Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we ask that you keep our first responders and our servicemen and women around the globe in your thoughts this evening. Thank you. In accordance with Mass General Law, this meeting is being audio taped and videotaped. If there is anyone in the audience doing either for this recording this meeting, would you kindly identify yourselves? Seeing none, I can move on. Mr. Florence, do we have anything under public comment? Okay. Do we have anyone under council comments? Okay. Number 5, approval of minutes. In your packet this evening, we have the approval of the July 24, 2019 executive session minutes. If you'll take a moment to look those over and to decide if you see any need to amend them in any way or any other comments. And if there is none, then I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the July 24, 2019 executive session minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Number 6, communications, correspondence, and announcement. I have an announcement relative to our last meeting last week, where I announced the appointments to our standing and ad hoc committees, and I also noted that we still had a vacancy on our bylaws committee for 2 residents. I'm happy to say that apparently it's proof that people do watch the video, that in the intervening days here, we've had 2 folks step forward from town who have asked to or expressed an interest in being appointed to the bylaw committee, and I've done that, and they are Tom Christensen and Bill Fonseca. And so we now have a complete list of committees, and these folks are all appointed now, and we can go forward with the work of all of those committees. Most especially right now, we have a fair amount on the plate of the Planning Matters Committee, and I suspect they'll be getting underway shortly in the days ahead. We don't appear to have anything under public hearings tonight, Mr. Florence. Orders of the day, there is nothing for licensing matters, financial matters. And now we come to old business, and which is the primary reason for the scheduling of this meeting this evening, and that is to come to a decision about the appointment of an acting town manager. Let me bridge the from last week to now. In last week's meeting, the council was provided with the resumes of 2 individuals who both brought a fair amount of municipal experience to the table. Because we had not, or I had not asked either one if we could use their name in public, we made the decision through council's advice to simply refer to them as Candidate A and Candidate B. Since that time, I have reached out to each candidate and asked their permission to be identified publicly. Both are have given a yes to the fact that they expected that their names would need to be made public, and they have granted that permission. So let me begin by saying that the two candidates that we will be discussing this evening are Mary McNally. She is finishing up her contract as the town administrator in our sister community next door in Hamden. And the other candidate is Mr. Robert Markle. He has recently finished a short stint as an interim administrator for the town of Richmond, Massachusetts. And that said, by way of bridging from last week to this, I want to start by just reviewing how we have gotten to this point. Upon the retirement and announcement that Denise Menard would be retiring effective this week, August 15th, the council has the opportunity to engage in some sort of process to appoint an acting manager. By charter, the language stipulates that the first manager should within 90 days appoint an employee of the town to act in the absence of the town manager should it exceed more than 10 days at a time. Unfortunately, that identification of an employee was not ever accomplished. And so the second paragraph in section or chapter 3 of the charter kicks in, and that's the piece that says that the council is obligated in the absence of an identified employee to fulfill the succession plan, that they are charged with appointing an acting town manager for a period of up to 4 months if necessary, and beyond that if necessary, one additional 4-month extension. So that brings us to the fact then that in July, we discussed around the table here how we should go forward, and it was decided that Mr. Kane and I would begin to look around for viable candidates who might be able to fulfill an acting town manager appointment for a few months. I'm happy to say that through our own phone calls and networks, we were able to receive these two resumes. If you asked me a month ago, did I expect to be having the opportunity to have two very solid resumes in front of us to work with, I would have probably said, I don't think so. We may have to go in really beat the bushes. That said, as I explained last Tuesday, Mr. Kane and I spent a fair amount of time talking with employees in Town Hall to understand what their concerns might be now and how we could help them. It was a consensus sentiment that they were hopeful that an interim leader, my words, would be in place and give a sense of settledness to Town Hall so that business could go on, day-to-day business could go on as planned. We also interviewed Ms. McNally as well as Mr. Markle individually. We met each of them informally for coffee in separate locations and got to know them, each of them a little bit better, to learn what they might be able to bring to East Long Meadow, what some of their interests were, some of the experience, asked them to elaborate a little bit on their experiences in the course of their career, not necessarily in just the position they were in at the present time. And I mentioned that last week to you all. That said, I would like to we both steered clear last week of prejudicing any one of you with our thoughts, because we felt it was important that you had the opportunity to have the resumes to consider over the course of the week. And if you wanted information from us, you could reach out. However, this evening, now we have to, the rubber has to meet the road here. We have two very capable individuals. Both have expressed an interest in the interim position. Ms. McNally has expressed vehemently that she wishes to be a candidate for the permanent position when the search process is, gears up. Having, and here's where I'm going to give you my impressions, and then it's fine for everyone else to weigh in. Having given this a lot of thought and listening to the sentiment that the employees in town hall and folks around town, just in casual conversation, not divulging what the identities of either candidate, I feel Ms. McNally brings a wealth of experience to the table. She's finishing up in the town administrator situation for Hampden. She is an attorney by trade. She has some significant experience in creating human resources projects. In fact, she was involved in a project to help the town of Hampden out with establishing an implementation for a human resource, I don't want to call it a department, but scenario for the town, nor do I want to put words in Hampden's mouth. She is a licensed procurement officer. You should know that under the charter, I always want to say contract, but it's our contract with the citizens. Under the charter, the manager is supposed to be the chief procurement officer of the town, or can delegate that to an individual. And Ms. Menard has delegated that responsibility to our accountant and director of finance. That stepping back from that, having the experience of a procurement officer in her background, I think, is a plus. I was struck by how passionate she was in relationship to working in government, and the fact that she wants to be a serious candidate for the permanent position. I think, having heard that remark, I think there's an upside for the town as the receiver of her services if she is to be appointed acting town manager. We get the opportunity, as we did with Denise Menard, to observe performance day to day while Ms. McNally would be on the job. If she succeeded in the permanent search and was appointed permanent manager, she would have at that point probably endured what we would call the typical 3 to 4 month transition, making less of a disruption in the workings of government. And that rings the biggest bell for me, because I go back to the sentiment shared by our employees that they want somebody in a leadership role who will communicate with them, who will interact and be available to them. And I feel that in this case, Ms. McNally offers that benefit to us. And so, again, given her passion for how she presented herself in the interview in terms of her energy and enthusiasm, and examples of how she has interacted in her current position. And I can also tell you, Mr. Kane and I have been contacted by employees in the town of Hampden speaking of her praises. These were unsolicited emails, so I just want to be clear on that. We did not solicit information beyond the candidates themselves. I would, my feeling is that I think Mary McNally is the best fit for East Long Meadow at this time. And I will now defer to Mr. Kane because he also has impressions, and we were side by side in all of this process. And then beyond that, the floor is open for anyone else's impressions.
Thanks. So I would pretty much agree with everything that Kathy stated rather than repeat all of her findings. But I struggled with the side-by-side of the two resumes because both resumes were outstanding, and we had two very qualified people. So I actually put the pile down for a couple of days and gave it a rest, and then decided to approach it from a different direction. And that direction was, what does our town need in the upcoming week through possibly a 6-month duration? And I started looking at, if you want to call them bullet points, what I thought was most important that this council will have to deal with too. And what really rose to a very high level was approximately 5 lawsuits. And without elaborating on those lawsuits, I can mention Zero Peas Road because that's public information, and obviously we have some ongoing issues with past employees. But I also look at very extravagant fees headed our way. So finally, the tiebreaker, in my opinion, was broke when I realized that we could bring an attorney on staff that might be able to soften maybe 75 to 80% of that work before it's handed out to an outside entity. And part of the reason I was looking to offset that cost is because it's going to become very, very apparent to people that at this point in time we're employing 2 town managers until the contract agreement is fulfilled with Ms. Menard. So if this acting town manager, intern town manager could soften a lot of those legal expenses and use her expertise to offset cost, then that cost could offset that salary that we will be paying her while we have 2 employees on hand. I also asked the question that if she were to apply for the full-time position, that might give us the opportunity, and this is looking a little bit down the road, a little bit further than I wanted, but if we were able to skip a search, if she fit the bill, then those searches could run $10,000 to $12,000, and of course she'd have to, she'd have to be a good fit for the town, and we'd have to find her a good fit as well. So I looked at the, I want to say the financial ramifications because I couldn't decipher between the 2 resumes as I previously stated. So at this point in time on those bullet points that we mentioned, I would suggest giving her the opportunity to represent us as the acting town manager at this point in time.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Through the chair, just
Sure.
a couple questions. At the last meeting, it was stated that the interim town manager, we were looking for someone part-time, no more than 20 hours a week. Is that still
That's
accurate?
Yes.
That's still accurate, and both candidates know that we'll probably just seek a part-time situation for the present. 18 to 20, obviously no more than 20. Both were amenable to that. Later, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about an agency that helps with professional searches. And when I spoke with that individual, he indicated that interims are typically part-time, or his experience is that it's more of a part-time scenario than a full. For the same reason that Mike just pointed out, that you're still paying salary to the individual leaving, as well as, and you don't want to overextend yourself financially.
So with that being said, I know Mike just mentioned that if everything worked out and if she looked great, maybe we could skip the search process. I'm gonna say right now, I'm 100% against that. We have to search for the best possible, and if it costs us money, it costs us money. But we need to get as many applications in to go through them. I will say, in 38 years of business, I've never hired someone just on a resume before, not being able to speak with them. I have a hard time with that because what's said on a resume is different than what you see in person. I'll let some of the other counselors chime in first.
I'm sorry, Don, I was looking at Pat, I'm sorry.
I have to agree with Ralph on that, on his comments. And like Mike, I had a chance to, step back and think about this. And I know last week, I was saying that I think whoever's the interim should not be precluded from being the permanent. And after giving it some serious thought and discussion, I totally changed that position. Whoever we vote today to be interim, in my opinion, I will not vote for permanent. And the reason for that is it creates an almost souring the milk appearance to the public. If I were the town manager of, say, Barnstable, and I wanted to come here, and I saw that I'm competing with somebody who's already in the inner circle of East Long Meadow, who already has developed relationships with department heads and so forth, and I have to go through this process where it already feels like it's going to be a fait accompli that this person went merely through the interim proceedings and becomes the permanent town manager, I think you are not getting the best quality people. So I'm just going on the record right now. I will not vote for the interim person as permanent town manager. That's just my thoughts.
Pat, were you going to say anything?
It's a tough decision because on paper, and even checking further, it seems like they're both qualified.
Pat, you speak up. They're trying to hear it in the back over that noise. I'm getting some signals in the audience.
I'm facing.
I know, I'm
I
just
can
looking
hear
at them.
So I too looked at eight different criteria, and I've heard one more tonight, and I can go either way. My biggest concern is what Don just stated. And I believe also that with Don, that it is difficult for somebody to feel comfortable when there's somebody already in the office doing the job to feel comfortable with applying. So that is a big issue with me. The other issue with me, however, is I don't have to deal with these people. Kathy and Mike do. So it's very important to me that Kathy and Mike feel comfortable with the candidate we select. And I would like to know how you would feel working with Bob if in fact the vote goes that way tonight.
I would have absolutely no issue whatsoever. They're both fine candidates.
I don't have any issue either. I'm just trying to decipher who I think would serve us best at this point in time. And those lawsuits are, are a big part of this, and she is an attorney. That is a major difference between the two candidates. And in regards to the search, I'm not against having a search at all. I'm just looking at cost here, and I'm saying that cost, if you decide to go with it, then we decide to go with it. But if it could be eliminated, it could be eliminated. And this intern town manager might not work out. We might send signals right away after 8 weeks that she's not working out, and we would hope that other candidates would rise to the occasion and come forward. But Mr. Marco has already told us that he will not go down that road. He's only interested in the interim position and has no regards for a full-time capacity at this point.
Through the chair. I've been listening to everything that's going on, and similar to what Pat did, in my career, all I've done is, everyone's heard me talk about pros and cons. I've also done a spreadsheet, and I weighed these individuals, one against the other, with what I think is important to our town. I agree with what Ralph said, but Don basically was just the opposite with regards to you won't vote for the current person, even if that person rises to the top as the best candidate. So I'm agreeing that we need to open this up and look at them all. I don't want to exclude anybody, including Bob or Mary. And Bob is automatically out because he, as Kathy just stated, he doesn't want the job.
Retired.
So if Mary were the person that we decide to vote on tonight, we're just throwing her out. We're excluding her because of the perception by other people outside the town and how they feel that the voting's going to go, or the job search is going to go, and that they're going to be excluded and she's already got an edge. Well, I don't feel that way. I want to vote and have an option to vote for the right person and the best person. My other big point, and that I've weighed this pretty heavily, is listening to Mike and Kathy. As Pat stated, none of us have to work with these individuals. And Kathy and Mike have done a stellar job over the last 3 weeks or so with regards to helping with this transition with Ms. Menard being out. And they spent umpteen hours in the town hall. And I was in and out of the town hall a couple of times for business. And they're doing a great job. The people there are less anxious than they were, let's say, 3 weeks ago. They feel that we're starting to take some action and do something. And they expect us to make a decision and do something fairly soon, as opposed to waiting and procrastinating on this and having it take, weeks and months. They want to keep the morale up. That I'm hearing is starting to come up. And they want to get rid of some of the anxiety, maybe doubt that they have about how the town's moving forward and who else might come in. So in support of Kathy and Mike, I think what I weighed heavily is the fact that we elected them to be our spokespersons and to lead the council. They've done all this work. I haven't had a chance to talk to either of these people. I'm looking at their resumes as well. But I have to trust in their judgment, as all of us do, going forward. And if they're recommending Mary McNally, I'm going to stand, I would have to stand with them in that regard, because we need to support them in this role.
Did you want to say something, Mr. Ford?
Two things, through the chair. So, first point is if tonight we're deciding on an interim town manager, so if you put the resumes side by side, there's one person that's clearly has a massive advantage in terms of experience being an interim town manager. Being an interim is a much different gig than being the permanent with the full backing of the charter. So, if you just simply look at that, then Bob would be the clear winner from a resume standpoint. But I understand what you're talking about, Tom, in terms of having the right fit. I chaired the search committee. I can tell you definitively there was some very, very good, viable candidates that withdrew because Denise was the interim, and they asked if she would be applying for the permanent position. And when we said yes, they withdrew. Whether or not they would have worked out anyhow, I have no idea. So I am not saying that I would go to the level of precluding them or not voting for them if we chose to go that way. I just think that you do have to think about that. Bob has a unbelievable amount of experience, much more experience than Mary, but they're both good candidates for different reasons. I would say that someone being able to come in and work in a part-time capacity for an interim position, and which is basically going to then in the first meeting that they're hired is going to take direction from the council on what are you keeping the seat warm, or are you actually trying to accomplish something? And if you're trying to accomplish something, then what are those short-term intermediate goals? So and so that's one piece. The other piece is that, of course, and with Ralph, we have to do a full search. We couldn't wait, and we're going to start essentially laying the foundation for a full search tonight. we're going to make a decision and what we're going to do. So we can't wait to evaluate somebody for 6, 8, 10 weeks because we're already going to be in process. The other thing I think about in that is that one candidate has expressed an interest for a permanent position. This is very different than the last time we went around. She's not going to just wait for us to make a decision on her and a whole bunch of other candidates. There are other positions that are available around us that I would have assumed she's going to pursue, because there's no guarantee that being an interim would grant her access to being the permanent position. So we may lose her because other people are much further along or going to move quicker anyhow. So from that standpoint, I'm in favor of going with the more experienced candidate who is experienced in interim positions and can stabilize us right now. And then not, taint that permanent search position. Obviously, she would be highly encouraged to, apply for that position. And she seems to be a very, knowing what I know about those people that applied 3 years ago, I can tell you that she would be, a pretty serious candidate to consider. So that's my take on it. There's a couple of things that maybe I'm just looking at a little differently. But they both, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be disappointed with either. I just think there's a few other factors to consider.
Done.
I mean, I agree. If I had to pick on resume, and that's all we have, is I would pick Markle. And Bob has something that the other candidate doesn't have. He actually was a town manager, not administrator. An administrator, as we know, is what we had with our previous government with a strong select board. He was a city councilor, so he understands, albeit years ago, our position. He also was a mayor of the city of Springfield. So when you have a resume who understands the difference between an administrator and a manager, and has actually served in those capacities, and even in a larger city version of what we do, that's pretty solid. My thinking is pick Bob, Mary, who has a strong resume, apply for the job, but as he pointed out, Joe's right, and he was in the trenches for that. People will likely not apply and put their current position on the line saying, hey, so you're not happy in Quincy, you're not happy, why are you applying for that? Knowing that there might already be the in for that position here in East Long Meadow. So I think we have a person, Mr. Markle, all right, town of Richmond, helping him get to that point. Perhaps also in that process, looking at qualified candidates that might be able to be suggested to apply. Before that, the town of Buckland, also interim. Before that, the town of Beckett, also interim. Before that, the town of Southampton, also interim. And I can keep going on to the next pages, folks, over here. So as far as a person who is looking for what the job actually is, I think Bob Markle would be the person, and then have Mary, as well as other candidates, apply for the permanent position. Because we do not want a repeat of the past where he said, qualified people already saying, why do I want to go through this charade when it already appears from watching videos like this that the council has already made up its decision who it wants to go to. And I don't want that. I want the best person available. And I think this particular approach will get us to that point.
And I have another point too, the chair.
Sure.
Okay. I wouldn't want anyone else not to feel that they don't want to enter the ring and compete because we have a town manager. The town manager is an intern town manager. And one other point that I'd like to bring up is too, I'm trying to avoid another change, and that's what's going to happen again. That's what's going to happen to all our department heads and our staff, is if we chose Robert tonight, then so be it. But it is another change, and everyone will know that he's basically passing through until we start the search.
May I respond to his comment?
Sure.
when you just said, I'd like to avoid another change, what it's sounding like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we pick Mary, we really shouldn't pick another person because we would be having that other change. And we don't want, and I respect what you guys do, believe me, more than you know, but we never had a chance to interview these people. And if this is basically a quasi getting to the end game type thing of having no other change, and basically Mary's going to have that end position, we've kind of innocently usurped the process, because you already put as a criteria yourself, we don't want more changes. So whoever we pick now, really, my values are we don't want more changes. And I think we kind of need a stopgap and then a no more change for the permanent position, but not on the stopgap when we have a person who's quite happy with the stopgap and understands what it's like to be there merely as the job defies as an interim position.
One more comment. please.
Okay, and then I'll
Yeah.
follow up.
I'm trying to avoid change. If change is necessary, then it has to happen. If we pick Robert, we all know there is going to be change coming. If we pick Mary, then it's a 50-50 chance that if she rises to the occasion and is successful with her run, if she chooses to decide that she's the right fit for the town, it's not just us being happy with her. She has to be happy with this career change of her own. So I'm just saying you are going to definitely have change if you choose Robert, and there's a 50-50 chance that you won't. But I can't see how anyone would disagree with that. If we can lessen change, it's good. I don't want to keep the wrong person to avoid change, but I think everybody understands where I'm coming from. And fortunately, we have two good people. So
My comment is that, first of all, the charter, by its definition of acting town manager, restricts a fair amount of authority that would be invoked in the powers of a permanent manager. So it's not as though any acting manager is going to just rule without a whole lot of thought behind it. There will be a limitation of powers. There's a fair amount of simply keeping the day-to-day business running smoothly. The other comment I want to make is to the previous search process, the very first one we did. And I would agree with what Joe was saying, in that when it was known that the acting manager was a candidate for the permanent position, 2 candidates withdrew. When you fast forward that, Denise ultimately, through the final interviews, rose to the top and became the town manager. And I want to be clear that that did not, to me, sully the process, nor did she do any disservice to the town in her employment here. She led a new council and a new form of government through the transition. I personally would not be against an interim being a candidate. I think that you might find that to be true in a number of searches. The other piece is if a candidate withdraws for that particular reason, that says something to me about his or her own belief in themselves. Well, if you don't think you can counter that and present as a superior candidate because you feel somebody else might have a leg up, then maybe that's not the kind of individual we want. But I don't believe that will compromise the integrity of our permanent search going forward. Any other discussion?
I'd just like to say, I think you guys did a great job. Both of these applications in front of us. that
We're
were
very
submitted
fortunate.
Are phenomenal. Like I said, it's hard to compare the two. I do think Don has a good point as far as when you look at them compared to each other. If we're only looking for an interim, Bob jumps to the top, just with his experience.
Okay.
I think they're both fantastic.
So, is anybody else wanting to add any more?
Well, I can through the chair.
Sure,
I
sure.
just wanted to point out that Don's correct that Mr. Markle has a ton of experience with regards to interim town manager. Some of them have been 4 months and one was a year. But they're all in towns that are 2,000 to 3,000 people. We're a town of 16,000. So we're not really talking about apples and apples. I mean, if you can go back through majority of these towns, and they're much smaller than East Long Meadow. I think Richmond is 2,500. I happen to know someone there. Buckland is probably smaller. Beckett is smaller. So there's only one town, maybe Southampton, and that would maybe rise to that level of East Long Meadow. So the experience he has is not with a larger community and the issues that we're dealing with. And we have a lot of public safety, we have fire, ambulance, and police. These towns probably have, some cases, I think, if I'm correct with Richmond, I don't know if they have a police force. I think they have state police patrolling the streets.
Many of the Berkshire hill towns rely on state police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's not going to know much about our public safety.
Or 5 lessons.
As I said,
I'm not sure I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would just.
You worked
That's
in
a
the
fact.
city, but you're also comparing Mary, who came from Hamden. That's her level of experience. So, again, I mean, not to disparage him, and I'm sure I think it's more than acceptable to mention this, that he's doing interim gigs because of his retiree status.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's not seeking a permanent position.
No, he's at a different spot in his career.
He's helping people out and doing something he's passionate
Yeah.
at doing. And so when the opportunity becomes available and happens to be Buckland, that's because that's the opportunity that's available. Not that if he was choosing a permanent position, then it would probably be, something closer to home and larger in status. So I don't know, I just have a little different take on that.
Okay. Pat?
one thing I did not mention is the people that I talked to with respect to Bob, the people I talked to with respect to Mary. And all I can say is that, generally speaking, the people I spoke to with respect to Mary are way behind her. Some of the people I spoke to regarding Bob were not. And that has to weigh into my thinking too. So in answer to why I would vote the way I'm going to vote, that is an issue with me. Because I couldn't interview the candidates themselves, I went to people I knew and got their take.
And one other comment, please. I did the same, not knowing the candidates and looking at something in paper and only spending an hour and a half of my life with these candidates. I had to go up with a lot of outside interest with people that have experience working with these individuals. And I can honestly say, my phone, I just got texts that I won't reveal right now, that people that were in support of working with Mary in the past and very happy with what she accomplished in a short period of time. Yeah. But-
Through the chair?
Yes.
I'd like to point out too, I mean, this is a mistake that I own too. As part of the original search committee, when we were interviewing for the first town manager, I was involved with Joe on that. And I didn't put enough weight to the fact of a manager. I looked for different factors. We need someone who can manage. We need someone who can lead. Mary's resume shows leadership and running large operations, Springfield Parking Authority. I mean, that's huge. The DA's office, that's huge. Those are big operations. That's a true manager. Being an administrator, as you pointed out, or one of our fellow councilors pointed out, is someone who takes direction from the Board of Selectmen. And they just march to their orders. They don't take leadership. All they do is administer the rules of the Board of Selectmen.
Any other comments before we move to making a decision? I am not sure. I see a hand in the audience, but I don't believe under Robert's rules that we can entertain. We're not in a public hearing,
No.
unfortunately. And clearly, when it was time on the agenda for public comment, you didn't have the background of this information. But I don't believe, in fairness, we can do that. I will entertain a motion. We have to keep moving forward here.
I would like to make a motion that we appoint Mary McNally as the acting town manager.
I'll second that.
Motion's
I'm
been
not
made.
sure that's how that motion should go.
I
think
I
that,
agree.
yeah, no.
I think we should poll the
Yeah.
council and say which of the two you pick.
And then you make
see
the
where it
motion
goes.
based on
The majority.
majority.
Yeah, I agree with
I mean,
that.
I would defer to council, but
I would think technically, legally, the motion is appropriate, but I don't have objection either way, but I think the motion is appropriate.
so what if the motion doesn't pass?
Kevin says it's appropriate.
Another motion can be
You
made.
make another
Yeah.
motion?
I'm sorry, Mr.
And
Mean.
another motion can be made.
So we get to the same spot. I hear what you're saying, Don, that we poll each person and that becomes obvious, and then you move to make an appointment.
Polling everyone.
So the-
As you vote, the poll is
withdraw my
occurring.
objection.
That's okay.
And this is a roll call vote?
Yes.
I think so, well, if we
Yes,
poll
please.
each, yes, please.
I'm requesting it be
Yes,
a roll
of
call
course,
vote.
Of course. The motion's been made and seconded to appoint Mary McNally as the acting town manager. This is a roll call vote by unanimous choice. Mr. Ford, do
Discussion?
you want more discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
My discussion would be, what does that mean?
What does it mean? What-
Yes, that now we need to talk a little bit about what the deal would be.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. I don't think you can commingle now that discussion with this.
Okay.
The deal would be the same with either candidate, part-time.
All right.
The agency I spoke with yesterday about a permanent search recommended, I asked, well, what's a typical industry rate for an interim? They gave me an answer. I believe it might be out of our financial capacity to go that route, but I also can share that though we never talked money with either candidate, both made it clear that, I don't want to put words in their mouth or make this seem as too simplistic, but the money piece was not the driving force in their interest in the position.
Thank you.
So what we're basically voting on is what you're saying is to allow you to enter into
Negotiations.
negotiations
Yep.
with one of the candidates. And this is for the interim position,
This is
right?
just for the acting town, the
Well-
charter refers to it as acting town manager.
One night I don't have my chart. in
Here.
front of me. I just wanted to make sure because I know it also talks about an interim town manager.
It would
which-
be interim if the manager had created a succession plan. But because we have to
Yeah.
appoint, it's now acting.
Acting.
It would be acting if she had created, because she would have appointed an acting town manager, because there is none and it's now an interim.
Yeah.
And we have.
The charter refers to an interim town manager filling a vacancy when the town manager is absent from office, and the interim serves during the period of vacancy, or during the period of absence, rather. When there is a vacancy, the charter refers to acting town manager appointed by the town council.
So my motion, did I use acting?
Used acting.
Yeah.
So, on the floor is a motion to appoint Mary McNally as acting town manager, with the understanding that Mr. Kane and I will negotiate the parameters of the short-term agreement.
Can we change the motion to that?
Well,
Negotiate
it's
appoint-
kind of inherent in it, but yes, if you want to put that in there.
So you're
Author-
looking to amend
Authorize
it?
authorize
that-
us to approach.
You okay with that? You're-
And I've already voted, so you guys
Yeah.
We would come back
amend it. Go ahead.
in your consideration, and, you know,
Yes.
in terms of
Are
money,
you all right with
benefits,
the
hours.
title?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we got it right,
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
So we started the roll call vote?
Mr. Ford?
No.
Mr. Page?
No.
Mr. Anderson?
No,
I will vote yes. Mr. Kane?
I am a yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
I am a yes.
Fair enough. The motion passes 4 votes to 3 in favor of appointing Mary McNally as the acting town manager. Mr. Kane and I will enter into some conversation with her around the parameters, also with the help of our council, and move forward as quickly as we can with that, get her in place. Thank you for all of your discussion and for your insight. Some of our conversation now triggers the next item on our agenda, which is to a discussion regarding the search process for a permanent town manager. I too am a proponent of doing a permanent search, a process for the permanent search, a professional search. Knowing that our neighbors in Long Meadow are involved in this right now, I had some conversation with the chair of the select board to understand the process that Long Meadow used to engage an agency to help with the locating a new manager for them. Ms. Angelides explained that she was aware of 3 notable agencies in Massachusetts that have built their reputation on conducting professional searches. She recommended she told me the name of the search committee they're using, or, excuse me, hard time with words tonight. The agency that they're using, I'm not going to disclose that right now because I'm not sure that's appropriate, because we may choose to go through a more official process. But she gave me the contact information for the agency that is being used to do the Long Meadow search. I spoke with that gentleman yesterday. He returned my call, and he spoke about the work that his agency does, gave me a few statistics about how many searches they've done in the last 3 years, and also said right now that their agency has 10 active municipal manager searches going. Obviously, one is Long Meadow. I believe another one may be in Palmer or Ware, but I don't want to put words in his mouth because he did not name that community. I'm just aware that that may be the case. He spoke about, I asked him timeline, what would you feel is a reasonable timeline to do a search? He said 90 days from the start of engaging their agency, he felt was reasonable before they would have, before we could name someone. So we're still looking at September, October, November. We're back into the early holiday season, if you will, before we will be in a position to appoint. As I said, he gave me a parameter of what, because I asked what you would pay an interim. And he also offered to send me a template for the typical type of contract they would engage in with the town. Here's what we need to decide on. We could do what Long Meadow has done and simply pick an agency and select them. Or we can do a RFP, a request for proposals. The trigger on the requirement to do an RFP for a proposal is if the value of the service will exceed $10,000. In Long Meadow, the search cost does not exceed $10,000. Without, we're not here to talk about Long Meadow's business, but I can tell you that it does not exceed $10,000. The benefit then of a company that could provide the service for less than 10,000 does not restrict us to using the RFP process. If we go out for proposals, it will take a month to put us in a position to pick a company to do business with. So the downside to that, to the RFP, is you need an extra 30 to 45 days in order to find an agency. So I guess that's the input I can give. Is it a consensus of this council that we should conduct a professional search?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we know that much. So then what's the pleasure of the council? To do an RFP? Or to independently look around?
Can I
Yes.
add a thought through the chair? Given the way that these agencies are set up, the ones that we're potentially talking about, Collins Center being one of them, we did a very good job, but our cost last time was more than $10,000. Because of the way they're certified, you can use them without going through an RFP.
The Collins Center, yes.
So an RFP would be a complete waste of time and not necessary. I was very partial. I thought they did an excellent job. They educated us in a time of need with the charter and as well as the search committee. You run the search committee. I didn't see any deficiencies in what they did, the candidates they brought to us, the way they advised us. They were out here every meeting holding our hand. So they're a known quantity. They might be more expensive, but I liked working with them. So if there's somebody else that is less expensive, okay, but we haven't worked with them. So I think either way, and we can verify this, but either way, I believe we can use any of those three agencies. I don't know about the third, but we could check and see what
They're probably on the state contract.
because
so-
because they've already been vetted. So
I suspect you might be right. Just for information purposes, I asked our finance director what was spent on the first search through the Collins Center, and it was $18,500 and some dollars. So I can't imagine it would be any cheaper 3 years out, but it may be in that ballpark.
I'm
I
not
can
opposed
only-
to trying someone else, but I'm not like Ralph. It's like we want the best candidate, we want the best process. At the end of the day,
Is it fair that we should ask the Collins Center, I'm just throwing this out there, and this agency that I spoke with, to see who gives us a better price?
I am definitely in favor of connecting with more than one agency
Yeah.
besides the Collins Center and let this council decide on who we choose to go forward.
Okay.
we have another meeting in a couple of weeks. I would say that
I can get that
You know,
information.
if we do not, if the procurement process, if they don't, and I'm pretty sure they don't, somebody can call them, ask for some information, present it to the group at our next meeting, which is
10th of September.
2 weeks away, 3 weeks away. Oh, is it really? It's a little longer. So we're going to lose.
It's 3 weeks,
Yeah, we're going to lose 3 weeks.
but we don't have another meeting in between even if we didn't go that route.
That's your schedule. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I would be in favor of getting a proposal from at least two, possibly a third.
So what's to stop us tonight from making a decision to grant you the ability to compile that
Seek
information?
proposals.
Well, I would suggest we meet next week. Like, I hate to keep doing this, but at the same time, 3 weeks is 3 weeks. I mean, that's, I mean,
I'm
we're
certainly
waiting
not
3 weeks just to pick a vendor, to then give them authorization, to then enter into agreement, to then start the process. So now we're 5-6 weeks out before we start seeing any action.
We could have this information for a week out, right?
We can, but I want to go back to vacation schedules and tell you I will be away. Mr. Anderson, I thought you told me last week you were away. Mr. Henry, you're going to be away.
So
Mine like a steel trap.
Look, it's us four.
4 could do it. We don't need a supermajority. You guys are okay with that? We're picking a vendor, we're not picking a candidate.
No,
That'd be fine.
I mean, I'll make myself available if you guys want to do it. It just means that we have to contact them, get basic information, and then somebody's got to come back and say, get the information before the meeting to us, and then we then
And that would
collaborate
be,
and decide.
that would be the sole purpose of that meeting.
That's it.
only that agenda item.
I don't want to wait 3 weeks.
I don't think so.
I
Fine.
don't either.
Perfect.
You know.
So then if there are 4 of us here, we have a quorum and we meet, it's okay with the rest of you. That will be the only subject matter, and you'll have time to review the material prior to the meeting, hopefully, depending on how quick you can compile the information.
I'm fine with that.
You might have to do that. Since
Then I'll
I'm
work-
leaving tomorrow.
I will work on it so that it can
So
be delivered.
schedule-wise,
So, Mr. Florence, August 20th at 6 PM.
I could do Tuesday.
I'm pretty much open.
I will be here as well.
Tom? Okay?
I'm just trying to, my daughter's visiting and I have to bring
Bring
her.
her.
But she's,
That's to bring her to the airport.
no, she's leaving, departing at 7 PM.
Do you want to do Wednesday, the 21st, or Monday, the 19th?
No, I don't want to do it on
So
the
we do it
19th.
the day after, we
Yeah.
should do it the 21st, Wednesday?
Yeah.
You have to get the agenda out by tomorrow.
Well, no, that's what we're saying, forget it, forget
Yeah.
19th, we're the
Yeah,
21st.
I'm bringing her to the airport and I don't want to miss that opportunity to say goodbye.
I could do Wednesday, the 21st,
Yeah.
at 6. Or we could even do it earlier.
I was just gonna say, if
5,
there's 4 of us, if we
Oh,
could,
no, you
I'd prefer 6.
you said you'd come in anytime.
Any day, I said.
I thought you said 3 o'clock in the morning.
If you do 6 PM on the 21st, I will be walking through the door, but I could make that probably.
Let's do that then. Let's do that.
All
Wednesday.
right, Wednesday the 21st.
At 6
At
o'clock works
6.
for you.
Yes, 6. Well,
Okay.
You want to start to form a committee? You want to start reaching out to residents? And what we did last time is we had 5 residents. I was the only council member on the charter, on the committee, and
The-
just facilitated, and they made the decisions
I,
to push the final
okay.
candidates through.
The agency we pick will set that up for us.
Now,
well-
we determined, it was our
Yeah.
decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we did 5, 7's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's too hard to coordinate
It's
people,
that
too many
for a
voices.
screening committee,
3's not
yeah.
enough.
No,
That's 5 seemed to work.
I agree, Joe.
That committee was to narrow down the names that the Collin Center gave.
Yeah, so essentially,
They
they
give you
gave
a
us a whole
whole group.
booklet of resumes. We started to go through resumes, some people were clearly not qualified, we quickly knocked out those candidates. Then we got down to a reasonable number, we set up first interviews, and I forget how many were in the first wave. It was a pretty good number. We went through interview process there, that collaborated on, who we thought was best. We called a smaller group of people back for a second interview, collaborated again, made a decision on finalists, and then we pushed the finalists back to the full council. So essentially the full council only saw, was it 3?
3, I believe.
3 best,
Yeah.
what we thought were the best.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. we can start reaching out to residents and see who wants to join.
I've already had residents inquire about serving the town in that capacity, so.
Get some people on that committee, start getting names together. We can talk about that next week.
Mm-hmm.
Can we post that? I know you're
Put
on
something on the
vacation.
website? Sure.
Like where do they go to Tom's office?
They
to-
should send it to Tom, yeah. Okay, fair enough. All right, so we have no executive session for this evening. And that said, I will entertain, oops, I'm sorry, one thing.
Just pass over the new business and summary, just take.
Oh, summary action items. So we know that we'll be meeting next week. Either Mike or myself will make sure that we have proposals from the three most notable agencies out there for this sort of thing. And we will be back in session on the 21st at 6 o'clock. I'll entertain a motion now for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
So we are adjourned at 7:07 PM, and we'll be back in session next Wednesday, August 21st at 6 PM. Thank you and good evening.